I sat half-dressed on the hood of my husband's Mustang when Derek, our nanny, walked in and saw everything. His face crumpled in shock, the laundry slipping from his hands as silence swallowed the room. In that frozen second, I knew I had crossed a line I could never undo. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The garage smelled faintly of motor oil and old leather, the heavy scent wrapping around me like a second skin. Peter's beloved Mustang, once a symbol of our shared youth and dreams, had become a relic of another life, one where he still looked at me with wonder instead of distracted indifference. I traced lazy circles on the polished hood with my fingertip, the cold metal against my bare thigh grounding me in the reality I was so desperately trying to escape. My phone buzzed softly against the hood beside me, Derek's name lighting up the screen like a warning flare. My heart skittered. His last message was a cautious one. "Are you sure about this?" But in my fog of loneliness, it read like an invitation. I picked up the phone, my hands trembling just slightly, and typed a reply that left no room for interpretation. Sent it. Exhaled. A part of me felt liberated, electric. Another part already braced for the shame that would inevitably follow. In the dim light, the garage felt like a secret world carved out from the coldness of my house, the sterile glow of Peter's absence. Here, surrounded by the silent artifacts of a life that had gone quietly stale, I let myself be someone else. Someone bold. Someone wanted. A low groan broke the stillness, the mechanical sigh of old hinges. My head snapped up. The garage door, the one that led into the house, inched open. Derek stood there. He wasn't supposed to be home yet. He wasn't supposed to see me like this, a half-dressed mess of a woman perched like a desperate teenager atop her husband's abandoned prized possession. For a breathless second, we stared at each other across the thinning air. His hands were still wrapped around a basket of folded laundry, the most ordinary thing in the world, grotesquely out of place against the obscene intimacy of the moment. His mouth opened, closed, opened again, but no words came out. I slid off the car hood with a graceless thud, panic igniting in my veins. My cheeks burned, my mind scrambling for explanations that didn't exist. Every molecule in the room seemed to buzz, humming with the irreversible knowledge that whatever had existed between us before, professional respect, warm familiarity, unspoken boundaries, had been shattered. "Derek," I croaked, my voice foreign to my own ears, raw and exposed. But it was too late. The moment had already branded itself onto both of us, in a scar that no apology could erase. I couldn't move. The garage seemed to shrink around me, the air thickening, each second stretching out unbearably long. Derek's eyes, so familiar, so safe, no longer held warmth. Only shock. Only a quiet, heavy sadness that pierced far deeper than any shouting ever could have. "What's going on, Emily?" he said again, the words rasping through the stillness, as though it cost him everything to say them. I jerked my hands toward my blouse, fumbling with buttons I couldn't seem to grasp. My fingers were clumsy, frantic, my mind racing for an explanation that didn't make me look exactly like what I was. Pathetic, desperate, wrong. "It's not," I choked, the words catching in my throat. "It's not what you think." Derek didn't move. He just stood there, frozen, the basket of laundry drooping in his arms as though it had become too heavy. His gaze swept the scene, me hastily covering myself, the phone abandoned on the hood, the unmistakable traces of what I'd intended. He knew, and so did I. I stepped toward him, my heart thundering against my ribs, desperate to erase the truth hanging in the air. "Please, Derek, don't tell Peter. It was stupid. I wasn't thinking. I... But my excuses sounded as hollow as the garage itself. They bounced off the concrete walls and fell flat between us. For a terrible moment, I thought he would just turn around and leave. Or worse, start yelling, exposing every shameful thing I had just laid bare. Instead, Derek lowered the basket to the ground, almost reverently, and walked a few slow steps forward. He didn't look at me like a man tempted or angry. He looked at me like someone witnessing a slow-motion car crash, helpless to stop it, sickened by the inevitability. He sat down heavily on the wooden workbench, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. His head dropped for a moment, and when he finally looked up, his voice was low, hollow. "Emily," he said, shaking his head. "You need help. This isn't you." No accusation, no fury, just heartbreak wrapped in 5 words. It landed harder than any slap could have. I felt my legs weaken, my chest tighten under the weight of it. Derek wasn't disgusted by me the way I feared. Worse, he pitied me. And in that raw, agonizing instant, I realized something even more unbearable. I pitied myself too. I had crossed a line I could never uncross, and now the only thing left between us was the silence of understanding, a silence louder than any scream. The days bled into one another, each one a careful balancing act between pretending everything was normal and choking on the truth I couldn't escape. Peter's return should have been a relief, a restoration of the order I had so recklessly fractured. But instead it became a daily exercise in silent agony. He laughed easily, kissed me absent-mindedly, played with the boys on the living room floor while I stood at the kitchen sink, my hands trembling under the stream of water. If he noticed the way I flinched when he touched me, or how my smiles didn't quite reach my eyes anymore, he didn't say. But Derek's presence had mutated into something unbearable. Every time I caught a glimpse of him across the hall, helping the boys with homework or cleaning up after dinner, I felt the ground tilt beneath me. His silence wasn't mercy. It was a blade pressed just beneath my skin, ready to cut if I forgot the price of my betrayal. I tiptoed through the days, ghost in my own home, until the night it all came to a head. The boys had finally drifted off to sleep, their soft breaths rising and falling in the dark. I kissed their foreheads, lingering a moment longer than usual, steeling myself against the loneliness gnawing inside me. That's when I heard it. A knock. Soft. Deliberate. I froze in the hallway, heart pounding against my ribs. It was my bedroom door. Not the guest room. Not the den. Mine. I opened it a crack and saw Derek standing there, his face grim, hands stuffed into his pockets like he didn't trust himself to move them. "Can I come in?" he asked, voice low enough that I barely caught it. I nodded stiffly and stepped aside. He didn't sit, didn't pace. He just stood there, heavy with words he clearly didn't want to say. "I'm not going to tell Peter," he said. And for a split second, relief rushed through me. Foolish, desperate. But then he continued, each word like a slow hammer blow. "But you need to, or I will." There it was. The deal. The sentence. Not blackmail for silence, not a demand for anything tangible. Just a mirror, held steady and merciless, reflecting every dark, ugly thing I had become. I bristled at the audacity. How dare he? But the anger sputtered out almost instantly, collapsing under the unbearable weight of the truth I could no longer outrun. He wasn't punishing me. I had already done that myself. The guilt sat heavy in my chest, a gnawing, festering thing, and in Derek's steady, sorrowful gaze, I saw exactly what I had destroyed. Not just my own integrity, but something innocent, something good. And there was no way back. Morning light bled slowly into the house, pale and cold. It slipped across the kitchen tiles, crept up the walls, but it did nothing to thaw the ice lodged in my chest. I sat at the table for a long time, staring at my hands, rehearsing the confession 100 different ways, every version more disastrous than the last. No script could soften what I had done. When Peter came downstairs, still groggy from sleep, I almost lost my nerve. His face, unguarded and unsuspecting, struck a fresh wound in me. He kissed the top of my head, murmured something about making coffee. I stopped him with a touch to his wrist, barely a touch, and he froze, sensing the tremor in my fingertips. "I need to talk to you," I said. My voice sounded hollow, scraped raw from the inside. He sat across from me, mug forgotten, confusion flickering across his features. I didn't dress it up. I didn't try to justify or excuse. I spoke plainly, honestly, ripping myself open piece by piece. The loneliness that grew like rot while he traveled. The desperate, foolish hunger to be seen. The reckless choices that almost cost us everything. I never mentioned Derek by name. That detail belonged to a deeper, darker place neither of us needed to touch. When I finished, I waited for the inevitable eruption, for Peter to shove back his chair, shout accusations, tear the fragile shell of our life apart with bare hands. But none of that happened. Instead, he blinked at me, and in the stunned silence that followed, tears welled up and slipped free. Quiet, unashamed tears that streaked his cheeks faster than he could wipe them away. "I should have been here," he whispered hoarsely. "I left you alone for too long." The words broke something in both of us. Not anger, not blame, but grief. Grief for all the ways we had lost each other without even noticing. We sat there, clinging to each other, tears soaking into the fabric of our lives, mourning not just the betrayal, but the slow erosion that had made it possible. Counseling came next, tentative steps toward something that resembled healing. There were nights when rage cracked the surface, days when silence was safer than words, but underneath it all was a stubborn will to rebuild. Derek left quietly, offering no farewells beyond a respectful nod. His absence felt like a necessary wound, an amputation to save the rest of the body. And then, months later, when the dust had barely settled and the house still echoed with the rawness of our efforts, the unthinkable happened. 2 pink lines. A heartbeat fluttering against a monitor. Peter's child. Our child. Proof that sometimes even the most broken soil can bear new life if you have the courage to plant something again.